Welcome to this session on tips and strategies for effective networking. I'm Noro Andriamanalina, Director of Academic and Professional Development for the Graduate School at the University of Minnesota. I want to begin by asking you to think about why you're at the University of Minnesota, why in graduate school, why here, and what you hope to give, what you hope to gain. Give in terms of your skills and experiences that could benefit your department, faculty and staff, colleagues, peers, and what you hope to gain. Because you're not in graduate school passing time, you're in graduate school to gain information and acquire skills and competencies so that you can transition into a rewarding career where I hope you will affect positive change in your field of interest. So I want you to think about your ideal job after graduation. For those of you just starting out, you might say, well, I have no idea what I want to do with my degree. That's fair. But the reason I want you to think about your ideal job is because part of what you're going to do in graduate school depends on what you want to do with your degree immediately after graduate school. So you cross the stage, degree in hand. Now what? What's your title? What is the title for the position that you would want immediately after graduation? So are you manager of a lab at a federal agency? Are you director of a nonprofit? Are you an assistant professor of a particular subject matter at an academic institution, like a 2-year or 4-year or a research university? What are your job responsibilities? Okay, so responsibilities could be research, teaching, administrative, you're supervising a team, you're allocating budget for expenses and salary, you're leading meetings or you're in meetings constantly. So what are your responsibilities? So you can imagine different types of work that you would be doing in your ideal position. Then I want you to post your ideal job. So what qualifications do you have to obtain your ideal job? What skills and experiences would you need? And be honest and genuine about what those skills and qualifications are, because you need to think about whether you have those qualifications and skills to actually get that ideal job when you graduate. Then you would think about your strengths and areas that you need to develop while at the university to get that job. So for example, if you say, well, I want to be a director of a nonprofit organization focusing on environmental justice, for example. Well, based on the posting of that ideal job, do you have strengths that's in that posting in terms of your qualification and skills? So are you already good at organizing? Do you already have management or leadership experience? What do you need to have that you currently don't have to be a top candidate for that position? And that's what you're going to be focusing on while you're at the University of Minnesota. So I want you to think about information gathering and planning as a road for success. Information by itself is just information. You just sit on it if you don't do something with it. And planning requires information. You can't plan if you don't have information. So these go hand in hand. So think about information as giving you options, and options as a way to be successful or effective in reaching your goals. So areas where you might want to plan for success would be searching for funding, research, public speaking, leadership or management opportunities, community engagement, career exploration, job search, and networking. And networking is key because it opens the door to get information on all of these possible areas where you want to grow or may need to grow to get the kind of job you want. So planning for success requires networking so that you have valuable, reliable information that people in your network can provide. So planning and networking are important, and there's a tool called the IDP, Individual Development Plan. Some of you may know what that is, and for those of you who don't, it's simply a tool that helps you identify professional goals and objectives. It helps you assess your skills relative to the goals you set for yourself. So for example, if you say, I would like to be assistant professor of music, for example, at a research institution. So you set that goal and look at your skills to actually secure that kind of a position. So you put your goals and assessing your skills into a plan to see where you have to develop competencies needed to achieve those goals using resources and networks. And you can share the IDP with people you trust in your network, or maybe doing the IDP will show you that you don't have a lot of people in your network who could help you achieve those goals. So that in and of itself is important information to have. This is a template of an IDP, and there are hundreds of examples of IDP templates online. But what you need is to make sure that the headings, areas to develop, goals, strategy, action steps, and timeline, and the resources, that you have that in the template that you're using, regardless of what the template looks like. So some people say, I don't like squares and linear thinking, I like circles. That's fine, as long as you're able to identify those headings. So with areas to develop, you would think about 3 to 4 areas where you're currently needing to develop those areas, and think about long and short-term goals. So short-term for me is usually based on semester, fall and spring. What are your strategies to achieve those short-term goals, the steps and by when, and then who are the resources, or what are the resources, okay? So let's look at an example of a completed IDP for, let's say, someone named Joe. So Joe is interested in oral presentation, or looking at how to use technology with a diverse audience. So Joe is looking at learning 1 tool for fall 2019, learning 2 tools for spring 2020, and Joe's overall strategy is to establish contact in 2 centers, CEI and OIT, and Joe knows what they are, and meeting with Jill Blaine, Kelly Strong to take workshops. Again, 1 tool for fall, and then for spring 2020, learn 2 tools. So on the action steps and timeline, Joe would take 2 workshops, and then develop mock presentation with an audience, mock audience, as part of the spring goals. And for resources, Joe has CEI staff, OIT staff, Bill, and Farah. So Bill could be Joe's neighbor maybe, who's really good at technology, maybe works for a technology-based company. And then Farah could be a colleague or a peer who did a presentation that was very impressive to Joe, and Joe wants to learn more from Farah. So these are various areas, just suggestions where you might want to think about developing, but it depends, again, on that ideal job that you want after graduation. That's your base, because if that's the kind of position you're looking for, then you need to begin acquiring skills and experiences, knowledge in the areas where you want to secure a position. So you might look at this and say, well, my ideal job requires that I don't have experience in any of this. That's fine. But you might say, well, actually, there are 3 or 4 things here that I really might need in my for my ideal job, and I will focus on them for my IDP. So that's great. Now, when you look at the IDP template, I want you to look at that last column on networking, because it's important to know that without networking, without resources, you can't have a successful IDP, because you need information from people who have information you need to achieve those goals. So who might be able to help you get information on funding that you need to complete your graduate program and to be successful in your ideal job? Who might be knowledgeable about leadership opportunities, organizations you might join and lead in order for you to get that skill? So that's why the IDP is essentially a networking tool, because when you share this IDP with somebody, you can say, hey, I listed you here as a resource for funding. Is there something that I'm missing in terms of my action steps and timeline? Is this feasible? Or for networking and any other areas that you might list on your document. But let's take a look at networking. What is it exactly? It's interacting with others for mutual professional or personal benefit. And I emphasize mutual because some graduate students don't like to network because they may be introverts, and they feel uncomfortable or awkward networking because they feel like they're promoting themselves too much, or it's always about them getting what they need and want. But if you think of networking as reciprocal, in that you seek as others would seek from you, you give as others would give to you, then it doesn't feel intimidating or awkward. And people have been networking forever, since I would say the beginning of time, because you had to depend on other people to survive. And networking is just a natural part of life. We see it happen in fraternities and sororities and clubs and associations and communities. It's critical to professional development because it's important to mutually lift each other up in a networking relationship. So you and the other person both benefit from knowing each other and being in each other's circle. It's key for a job search because there are certain jobs or positions that are not posted, and you need to be invited into networks in order to know where those positions are. So your ideal job may not be posted. And it's unavoidable. But the good news is today it's easier because of technology. So in times where it's not a good idea to meet face-to-face, or you can't meet face-to-face in terms of in person because the person is far away, you have technology. So take advantage of the fact that we're in an age where there's so many options for interacting with people without being in the same physical space. So depending on who you ask and where you look on the internet, there is a certain percentage associated with what the hidden job market is. So the hidden job market is basically jobs that are not posted on websites or any kind of organization. So it could be 70 to 80%. But again, it depends on the survey that was done and the source. But from my experience working with employers and just the overall area of career development, it's been stated that between 70 to 80% of jobs are not published. So you wouldn't find out about them except for word of mouth. So networking is important because you want those jobs, and you also need to know the attributes that employers seek. So the National Association of Colleges and Employers did a survey and found that more than 50% of employers that participated in the survey listed these skills as attributes they're seeking from employees. So problem solving, strong work ethic, communication, and so forth. You can read that for yourself. But the important thing is when you look at your job posting that you develop for yourself for your ideal job, and you look at this, are there certain things that match or not at all? So for your ideal job, would you need analytical skills? Would you need strong written communication skills, flexibility, technical skills, and so forth? So I want you to think about if this is what employers are putting out there as important, how does that compare with what you put for your ideal job? And maybe you say, well, no, my ideal job doesn't require any of this. That's fine. But if it does, then this is confirmation that if there are skills that you need to develop for that ideal job, and it's also attribute that employers want, then you might want to think about focusing on those areas if you don't have strength in it currently. So I want you to see what just happened on this slide, where employers are hiring, starting with looking inside their company and seeing who's already there that has the skills and the qualifications needed to fill a position. Whereas as job hunters, we're looking at our resumes and making sure that we have skills and experiences documented so that we are in a better position to get the job we want. And what this is showing us is that we need to think more like the employer, where we network and try to find out who's in the company, in the organization that we might talk to learn more about a position that we're interested in or just the culture of that organization if we're looking to be in that organization as, again, that ideal job. So it's hard because you're a job hunter, you're not an employer, but in a way you have to think like an employer and start networking within that organization or that company so that you can have an insider's perspective of what's needed for that job that you're interested in or what's expected for that culture of that employer. So we've talked about the individual development plan as a networking tool because you need to plan and know where to get information to get the kinds of skills and experiences, knowledge you need for that ideal job. So look again at areas that you want to develop, goals, timeline, and again, your network of people who will help you accomplish those goals. Another tool is the elevator speech. Some of you might have already heard about the elevator speech. It's a 30-second speech that you would share with someone or mention to someone if you were going from one floor to another, and it's 30 seconds in that elevator. So you would provide your name if you don't know each other's name. Maybe you just happen to meet, and it's important to introduce yourself. General area, broader impact, and career interests. So here's an example. This would be a general elevator speech. I'm Liz Blessing, a doctoral candidate in public health at the University of Minnesota. My research is on childhood obesity prevention. I hope to work with public schools and state agencies in the Midwest to develop programs focusing on physical activity and nutrition. That's a general speech. People in your field, you would be more specific. I am Liz Blessing, a doctoral candidate in public health at the University of Minnesota. My research focuses on childhood obesity prevention using the Taylor-Smith model and mixed methods to determine the link between physical activity and school nutrition. I hope to work for the MASC to develop programs similar to JUMP and BUILD to improve children's health. Notice how Liz is changing her language by using acronyms familiar to people in her field. She's not doing that with the general example. The reason you want to be more specific is if people know, and she's assuming people know what mask, jump, and build are, then they can follow up and say, you know what, I worked with mask, or I'm on the advisory board for jump, or whatever. And that would lead to more conversations that would help both Liz and the person she's talking with. So it's an hourglass model. Broad, what is your interest broadly? What are you doing related to your interest? What methods are you using? What career path are you pursuing? And then broad again in terms of how will that impact society? How will that impact your field? How will that impact the broader discipline? So we've talked about the IDP, the elevator speech, and now 30-minute informational interview. So some of you might be familiar with the informational interview. It's to learn about a particular career path and or a position of interest to you. So you would interview someone who's in a position you're interested in eventually or immediately after getting your degree. Again, that ideal job. It's to get tips on preparing for the job search in that field, in that employment sector, in that company. So you're doing this as you're going through graduate school so that you can prepare for when you're actually on the job search. Ideally, you're not on the job search yet when you're doing informational interview. You're just building to that. It's a way to meet potential employers so that you can expand your network. But you're not looking for a job. You're not interviewing for a job. You're interviewing somebody for information about a career path you might want to pursue. And if there's good rapport and good connection, that person might at some point consider you for a job, but not at the time that you're doing the interview. So you would research an organization where you would be interested in talking to somebody who's in a position similar to what you would like to get when you're done with your degree. And the idea is to focus on the interviewee, not to focus on you, because you have only 30 minutes to talk to somebody. And there are 5 questions that I suggest you ask. I share this with my graduate students. Ask the person, why were you interested in this area of work? You want to know whether your interest and their interest are similar. Why or how did you find out about this position? What is your role or responsibilities, rewards, and challenges? So you want to know what they do. Are they in meetings? Are they traveling all the time? Because you want to know whether this is the kind of career you want in case you don't want to travel or can't travel for various reasons. And what advice would you give to someone interested in a similar position? So you're basically saying, I'm interested in something similar to what you're doing, but I don't know what I need to know now. And so this person would say, well, the advice I would give is make sure that you have a lot of managerial experience or excellent communication skills or a strong network of support or professionals or proposal writing skills, whatever. The last question that's very, very critical: is there anyone else I should talk to? This is important because whoever the person recommends you talk to, you talk with, that's your next informational interview. I tell my grad students that they need, at minimum, to do 2 informational interviews per semester until they're done with their degree. If you could do 1 every month, that would be even better. So they said, well, where am I going to find all these people to do informational interviews? If you end an informational interview with, is there anyone else I should talk to? There's your next interview. So it's a snowball effect, okay? And it doesn't end with just, is there anyone else I should talk to? You can ask, request very kindly and humbly that the person introduce you to that other person whom they would recommend you speak with. So you would say, I'm really grateful that you would recommend me to your colleague down the hall, like you said, but I don't know Sarah or Jackie or whoever. Would it be possible? Would it be a huge inconvenience if I ask you to please do an email introduction for me to your colleagues? And that way, you, the one seeking the interview, would probably get a faster response if the person already knows that you have been referred to them by a colleague. So make sure you end with, is there anyone else I should talk to? And that will begin your journey into informational interviewing. You just need that one to begin with. And then afterwards, it should be easier to get more referrals for informational interview. When you're done with the informational interview, 30 minutes is over, make sure you either leave a business card or some way for that person to connect with you if they don't have your email already. So depending on how you connected to them, if it was somebody introduced you, so there wasn't an email exchange, then make sure that they have some way to contact you later. Because the idea is not that you're going to leave a resume, because then that sort of implies that you're looking for a job or you were looking for a job, not necessarily an interview. So that's disingenuous. But the idea is that if they have further information about what they discussed with you or shared with you, that they have a way to get that information to you. But if they do say, well, do you have a resume? If they ask for a resume, then you could give one. You could say, I will email you one or send you one if you don't have one with you. But you don't offer to give a resume. You're not asking for a job. Always, always, always follow up with a thank you, either a card or an email. So I have thank you cards from students who've done informational interviews with me. They slip it under my door. They give it to our main office. However, they want to get it to me, and it's very much appreciated, but it also shows good character. You ask for 30 minutes of someone's time, someone who is busy, and the least that you could do, because you didn't pay them, is say thank you in a very grateful manner. So set up the interview. You know where you're going, what this person's responsibilities are in terms of what you can find out online, what they do maybe. Prepare for it by having the questions and knowing that people can sometimes be distracted. So you being prepared with questions, but not acting robotic, like where question one, question two, but conversational, casual, but professional, so that if the conversation goes astray, you end up talking about their backyard or something like that, then you can kind of bring it back and focus on those 5 questions that I suggested. You conduct, again, the interview in a very professional but very organic manner. Don't be nervous or stiff. Just be normal conversation and always follow up with a thank you. So planning and networking then using the IDP is essential because you have goals you want to accomplish, you have an approach, action steps and timeline, and the resources. So the IDP is a networking tool because it allows you to share what you want to accomplish with others. You list them as a resource, you ask for their feedback, make sure that what you're planning to do is feasible. Again, this is a template of an IDP. It doesn't have to look exactly like this, but the last column of resources and networking is that's where you are developing your network. So use the IDP as a tool to carefully reflect on what you need to achieve the goals that you want to achieve, using a strategy with action steps and timeline and resources or network. suggested areas to think about. You look at this and you say, well, I don't need to develop anything here because I already have all this for the ideal job that I want. That's great. But if there are other areas, you might want to make sure that you include that in your IDP. Or you might look at this and say, wow, I have 3, 4 right away that I know I need to develop, like publishing. Maybe I'm not as published as I'd like to be, or leadership. Maybe I need to join an organization on campus so that I could prove that I know how to manage a group of people. Whatever area you need to focus on, the IDP will allow you to do that because it will build your network to get information from people that can help you move to that next level. The elevator speech is related to the IDP. So in a way, these 3 tools complement one another. You have an IDP where you've listed out your goals, your action steps and timeline, and the resources. So if you're sharing your IDP with someone, they might say, well, tell me a little bit again about why you want to gain public speaking skills. What exactly do you hope to do after you graduate? So then you would bring your elevator speech and talk about your overall career goals. If the person is in your field, you would do that specific information, you'd provide that. If the person is not in your field, then you would have that general speech. The important thing about elevator speech is to have multiple versions of it. I don't speak to someone who's very well versed in educational policy or higher education as if I would speak to somebody who's more familiar with, say, K through 12. So you need to know how you talk to different people in different areas and different backgrounds. The informational interview is also important because once you have an IDP and an elevator speech sort of mapped out, then you'd be more confident in looking at that and saying, well, who do I need to talk to now to get more information about X, Y, and Z? So if you're, example, interested in an academic career and you want to be assistant professor of biology at, say, Macalester, for example, I would think that you want to identify an assistant professor or associate professor, someone at Macalester with whom you could talk about what it means and what is required to get an assistant professor position. So that's where that informational interview comes in. You have an IDP, you assess where you want to go with your degree, your career path. You think about what you want to do in terms of who you are. That's your elevator speech, 30 seconds. And then you look for people you can talk with about what it means to be in that ideal job. And that's the informational interview. And that's 30 minutes. Thank you for listening, for participating in this session. I appreciate it.